Hi everyone, this is a video for D100 Space. So this is brand new, it's just come out on Drive-Thru RPG. These are the free books that are in print on demand format, and there's a PDF format as well. There's a video there showing a product review of the books to give you an idea of what they all individually look like. We're just going to take the one of the books and take a look at the content for the purpose of this video. So if you go on Drive-Thru and want to see that review video of the products and see what they look like, the individual books look like, you can do so. Before we get too far underway, I want to take a look at the special thanks section. I want to mention a few people. First of all, Rob Oren from Rob's Tabletop World YouTube channel. I want to give a big shout out to Rob. He's been a great inspiration into creating this book. We discussed a few things over email about a D100 Dungeon space concept, and it's from those emails and those ideas that this product has evolved. So a big thank you to Rob. He's a really great guy and a big support of D100 Dungeon. Another person I'd like to give a shout out to is Jacob Wildling of D5 Questing. He helped look over the book in its final stages and gave a lot of advice, which was very much appreciated. And a couple of other people I want to mention is Matthew Morris of Adventures in Solitaire. His YouTube videos have been absolutely wonderful, and big shout out to you, Matthew, for all the efforts and videos that you've done for D100 Dungeon. They're much appreciated, and I've used some of the videos on the MK Games website because they were so brilliant. Another person is Christopher Belmonts, aka D100 Superfan. It's been a bit quiet recently, but he'd done D100 Dungeon The World of Good a year ago, and he sent me a very nice email recently, so I'm sure we'll be hearing from him soon. And another big shout out to Lans Tarek Kozar. I think I pronounced that right. I believe Lans' Christian name is Stephen, or Steve. So thanks, Steve, for all your help on D100 Dungeon's Facebook group with answering questions and so forth, and you're mentioned here in the book too. So those few people there, as well as all the others mentioned in this book, have all been great supporters of D100 Dungeon, and they all deserve a huge thank you from me. So thanks, guys, and girls as well. So okay, back to the actual product video. This is D100 in Space. It's a bit of a reskin. It's not a complete reskin of D100 Dungeon. There's lots of similarities. The rules are pretty much the core rules are pretty much what you would expect. They're based around the D100 Dungeon core rules, but there's a lot of added elements and changes which we'll have a look at in this. First of all, first up is the layout. The layout's changed to a 2-column format. This is something that may or may not be repeated in the D100 Dungeon books. Be interested in any comments and thoughts on whether you'd like to see that transfer over into D100 Dungeon as well. One of the things that we've got is quite an extensive table range. So I believe we've got a table for every letter of the alphabet apart from Q. So that shows you how the game has expanded from the basic D100 Dungeon. I've tried to include a lot of the fun elements that came and evolved from D100 Dungeon into this. So for instance, we've got the expanded find table. Some of these tables have been rejigged. So the find table from D100 Dungeon is now the uncover table, and that's expanded quite a bit. So if we look at that, this is more now in keeping with table FA from the D100 Dungeon book, and there's 100 entries in there. So there's a lot more variation to what you can expect to find just in this core book. There's the typical values sheet. We've because it's science fiction, because a lot of the weapons and so forth are now more stronger, well made than in a fantasy setting. There is no damage to weapons anymore, so there's damage to armour, but there's no actual damage to weapons. So if we can get onto table W, I need to relearn my alphabet, but here we go. So we're on table W. Some of the weapons as well, they have some extra rules for when you're attacking certain enemies. For instance, the heavy blaster pistol, the enemies marked with a robot icon, they suffer -1 to their defense value. So there's a few little quirks in with the weapons table there as well. Armour remains pretty much the same from the original D100 Dungeon rules. There is no armour value of 0 anymore. It starts from 1 and goes as high as 4. There is a damage value for armour, so armour will get damaged, weapons won't. Okay, there's the standard free career path. Doors hasn't really changed too much, but I have implemented damage to certain doors. So some doors get welded shut, for instance, or get stuck, and like we had in the Lost Tome of Extraordinary Rules, I think it was, or the Dragon Armour, there was a blast those doors rules. It kind of sort of replicates that in here with a few of the certain few of the doors as well. You can actually shoot your way through doors. Enemies is pretty much the same sort of format. There's a bit of a description as to what the monsters are like and so forth, but pretty much it follows the same. There's some new icons as well. There's things like creatures, insects type creatures, personnel, and things like holograph and plasma formed entities. There's and robots or robotics or cyborg type creatures with those sort of icons there. Facilities, the maps are updated to match a more sci-fi element. They look basing your maps on entering facilities, other starships and so forth, so you'll be building more sort of complex type maps. Geographic is very similar to the D100 Dungeon graphics. Geographic table, updated with the new types of enemies that you'll be facing. Hyperdrive events, we'll get into that in a bit. Implants, so replacing magic is cyberware, so you'll be wearing and updating your body parts with implants, and they're very similar to spell use. There's no HP loss when you use powers, these implants, but there is a power cost. So on your captain's log sheet, you'll be powering these Cybercon effects here with a power cost here, which you will be using from your power cells here. So you can store 10 power cells in your Cybercon unit, and you'll be able to activate and use cyberware by spending those powers. Let's have a look. So jump error, that's space travel. Kit, so kit is like your items, and it's got some sort of great things in there. Let's have a look at that. So okay, so there's things like if you decide to roll on table K, there's things like a cloak disruptor. So if you're wearing a cloak disruptor in your utility belt slot, then the captain suffers -5 to their strength or dex against enemies with the cloaked ability. So there's some new little bits that are jazzing it up quite a little bit. Okay, modifications applies to your starships. Operations, this is your quest log from D100 Dungeon. There's two types of quests or operations in the game. There's space missions and away missions. They're marked here: space mission, away mission. So the game will get you to do some space missions at times. Other times you'll be doing away missions. Away missions are like the quests of D100 Dungeon. Space missions are like performing missions in space outside of those away mission parts of the game. So I hope that explains that quite well. There's all sorts of things, like we begin with just basically starting the game off with learning how to travel in space. Then you perform some mining and collecting from an asteroid, and then you'll do some trading, and then we do an actual away mission. So there's your 4 introductory operations in the game, and then from there you have to find away missions by visiting spaceports and military docks, and then you can either accept them and then go off and do them, or find others. So that's your operations. Powers are like your legendary items, so they're boosted items that have a chip installed into them, and they give you certain bonuses, pretty much like legendary items do in D100 Dungeon. So that's those. There's some cool things in there, like increases the skill chip, increases eye and hand coordination with neural stimulants to enhance skills, and you'd get a +10 dex to that, and an adjusted value on your adjust value and fixed costs there. Okay, so that's those. Race, there's a free. Let's have a look at career and class. They're not very big tables, but basically you have a marine. You can play a marine, smuggler, or a techno, and your race is either alien, human, or cyboid. Okay, so those are those. Starships we'll get into in a minute. Trappings A, B, and C. They're like your treasure tables, and we'll have a look at one of the T tables. Okay, so there's those. You got things like a brain booster capsule used to gain +10 intelligence until your next shader pip on the time track. So quite similar to a potion. They're mimicking the potions, but it's form of a capsule that your captain will pop. And uncover was the find table, values, weapons. Right, so the other part of other than playing away missions, you're going to be navigating star systems, or a star system. So this is the star system here, and you'll be starting off somewhere in this region around here, and you'll be travelling backwards and forwards around here, performing missions and doing certain trades and so forth. And when you feel confident enough, you can start branching across the galaxy, going to different planets and systems, and visiting things and doing away missions and space missions. So for that you're going to need a spacecraft. So you begin with a starship. Let's have a look at that. This is a list of all the different types of starships that you begin with. There's you begin with something like a fast attack craft, so somewhere just below middle range, and you can progress up as high as the Explorer 5. Then while you've got your spaceship, you can add modifications to it. So on the back of your log sheet is your starship details. Okay, and on here, this is where you record your starship, and then below here you can record, depending on your starship, between 1 and 6 modifications, and they're recorded here. And like if you've played D100 Dungeon, as you add certain types of armour and weapons, then you get boosts to your characteristics. That's how modifications will work. They'll be adding boosts to your starship, and then you have a total and so forth. On your starship you can employ crew. Crew get added in this section here, and they aid you in certain tests that you might need to perform. Things like jumping along jump lanes, hyper jump tests, mining an asteroid, collecting different fuels and so forth. So these are the these will give you boosts, but the negative side of taking on crew is they expect to be paid, and the more you earn from quests and the more crew you've got, the more you're going to have to share with your crew. So there is a negative side to having a lot of crew on board, but it does boost your tests in a similar way that skills boost your adventurers tests in the D100 Dungeon game. So they are quite interesting features. On your ship you have a cargo hold and a cargo limit, so there's a limit to the amount of cargo you can put on board. You can store them in your cargo hold here. The red ones are sensitive products that can be traded, but they come with a risk of being caught and being fined by the port's authorities. And then there's a passenger manifest, so you can board crew, passengers looking for transport to different parts of the galaxy. So if we go back to the galaxy map, you might be here and wanting to transport somebody here. If you manage to get there, you can drop them off there and you'll receive money for that. So when you do a jump, so you've got your jump, so these green lines here, they're jump lanes, and they take a certain number of light years to make those jumps across, and depending on the success rate of tests that you perform to make it across these jump lanes will depend upon whether you pass or fail, how much distance you travel, and whether you end up with a hyperdrive event. So if an event goes particularly wrong, then you may be asked to roll on that table. So we'll have a look at the jump table. So if you have a jump error, then depending on how many light years you wish to travel, you will roll on this table to generate a result. If we was travelling 50 light years and we failed, we would roll the D100 on the 50 light years column, and it would tell us actually how many light years we managed to travel and whether there was a hyperjump event. So any of these H's lead to a hyperjump event, and then you would roll on this table and then something would happen on that hyperjump. So that is the I think that's covered all the tables. There's a section on creating your captain. That's like creating your adventure in D100 Dungeon. The abilities are things like Mighty Blow, Perfect Aim, Cybercon. So they're basically what we've seen in D100 Dungeon. The Cybercon has replaced the spell part of the game. Then you've got your tests, some primary and adjusted characteristics, pretty much what you would expect. Equipping items, armor damage. There is no combat damage, as we mentioned earlier. Combat track, as we saw earlier. Combat has changed very little. Enemy characteristics has changed. A lot of the abilities the monsters have either been renamed or been revamped. And then we get onto the starship section. So we'll take a look at that. Okay, so on the starship section, the starships have a set of characteristics. We have things like a salvage value, tech level, the amount of tech that's on board your ship, cargo space that you've got, your drive thrusters for navigating whilst you're in star systems, your fuel tanks, how much fuel's on board your ship, fuel scoops, the capacity of how much fuel you can scoop up out of chemicals in space, your life support value, how much crew that your ship can support and passengers that are on board, your jump speed, how much speed, how many light years you can jump when you test, Your power generator is your ship's ability to restore lost power, and your power level every time you perform something like a jump or a mining test, something like that. It's going to use power. Combat, you'll be using power to fight enemies. Your weapon systems is the amount of weapons you have on board and will help aid you in space combat. Your shield generator is how much damage your ship can sustain or offset. How many mods, how many mods you can put on board your ship, and your credit value as to what the ship's worth. You've got a section here on space combat. You can also board another starship and take control of it, and there's a boarding combat round there. And then you've got, once you've actually got to one of these star systems, let's show this on the map. So once you've actually got to one of these starship systems, then you actually have to navigate through the star system to get to the different areas. So this is moving through a star system rule. These are the points of interest that you will come across in each zone within a starship, within a star system. So there's 10 zones to each star system. Some of them will have a point of interest in them, some of them won't, and there's certain things you can do at those points of interest. Like for instance, at gas that's floating in space, for instance, we can try and collect some chemicals to sell at a spaceport. There's agricultural worlds where we can collect food. There's a wormhole within the galaxy, so you can jump between 2 points. There's space stations and military docks. They are used in a phase kind of like the Before Your Next Quest phase from D100 Dungeon, except that there's restrictions at one and restrictions at the other, so they're not interchangeable. So you can do some things at a space station and some things at a military dock. And then there's dead planets, which are mainly associated with away missions. Rules on moving between system to system, so there's some instructions there on how to do that. And then we've got some collecting food, collecting fuel that we can do while we're in space, and power our generators as well. And then a few little instructions there on how to begin your play, rolling for operations and performing space missions, details of doors that you might come across and so forth. There's probably a lot of things that I haven't covered. I hope I've covered a lot of it. This is just a video really just to show the different concepts and different ideas behind D100 Space. So sorry about all my rambling and getting all my mistakes and that, but I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching, and until next time, bye for now.